In today's video, we're looking at the 1920s, not just a decade of jazz, flappers, and speakeasies, but also a time of profound transformation, tension, and resistance. While the surface glittered with modernity, deep cultural, racial, and political undercurrents define this so called new era. From women entering the workforce to the rise of black nationalism, from immigration restrictions to clashes over science and religion, this was a decade that shaped the social battles still echoing in America today. Let's get started. The economic boom of the 1920s ushered in a new consumer driven culture. With new products flooding the market and the pressure to keep up with the Joneses, many families could no longer rely on a single income. As a result, more women began entering the workforce. By the mid 1920s, around 15% of married women were working, still a minority, but a noticeable shift. The image of the new professional woman became a cultural symbol, though it was more fantasy than fact. In truth, most working women were part of the lower classes, and very few held professional roles. Middle class women mostly remained at home, while those who did work were often confined to pink collared jobs, teaching school, office work, and service positions. These roles paid significantly less than those available to men. Despite lingering traditional roles, a new icon of female independence emerged: the flapper. Flappers represented a dramatic break from their Victorian ancestors. Inspired by the freedom of the post World War I era, the excitement of urban life, and the psychology of Sigmund Freud, young women began to challenge social norms. They cast off corsets and long skirts in favor of knee length, shapeless dresses, fresh colored silk stockings, and bright red lipstick. Some smoked in public, others danced the tango, the lindy, or the shimmy. Many drank, illegally, of course, despite prohibition. The flapper lifestyle appealed to single working class women living in cities who were earning their own wages. Affluent women quickly followed suit, and the flapper became a symbol of female liberation, for better or worse. The 1920s were not just transformative for women, but also for Black Americans. The Great Migration brought hundreds of thousands of Black families from the rural South to the urban North. This shift laid the foundation for a new era of political influence and cultural pride. In 1925, philosopher Alan Locke gave voice to this change with his essay Enter the New Negro. Locke's vision centered on self respect, pride in heritage, and a refusal to accept second class status. This new Negro would challenge racism head on and demanded full participation in American society. But the call wasn't just political, it was cultural, spiritual, and psychological. The boldest voice of this new movement was Marcus Garvey, founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Garvey's vision, known as Negro nationalism, celebrated Black identity. Black culture was most controversially Black separatism. He viewed white America as irredeemably racist and called on Black Americans to separate themselves entirely and build independent institutions. Garvey's movement gained enormous traction among African Americans disillusioned by Northern racism and economic hardship. His organization built churches, businesses, and even published a newspaper. He promoted pride, unity, and self reliance. But not all Black leaders approved. W.e.b. Du Bois called Garvey the most dangerous enemy of the Negro race. Eventually, Garvey was convicted of mail fraud and deported to Jamaica. Still, his message lived on in future movements led by figures like Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael. While political leaders and thinkers sparked debates, artists ignited a cultural revolution. The Harlem Renaissance flourished in New York's largest black neighborhood, showcasing a vibrant explosion of literature, music, and art. Claude McKay, a Jamaican immigrant, kicked off the movement, soon joined by luminaries like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Countee Cullen, and James Weldon Johnson. Black theaters, newspapers, and literary centers blossomed, and with them came a new cultural pride. Music was central. Jazz, in particular, captured the improvisational and rebellious spirit of the age. Louis Armstrong, a gifted trumpeter, became a household name and helped define the soundtrack of the Roaring Twenties. Not everyone welcomed the changes of the new era. As America became more urban and diverse, a powerful wave of nativism swept the country. Many saw immigrants as dangerous radicals, especially in the wake of World War I and the Russian Revolution. In response, Congress passed a series of restrictive immigration laws. The 1921 Emergency Quota Act limited new arrivals to 3% of each nationality's population as recorded in the 1910 census. But even that wasn't enough for some. The 1924 National Origins Act slashed quotas to 2% and based the figures on the 1890 census, favoring Northern Europeans and effectively banning East Asians altogether. A further 1929 law capped immigration at 150,000 people annually. The backlash wasn't limited to just immigration laws. The Ku Klux Klan experienced a shocking resurgence in the 1920s, ballooning to over 5 million members. This second wave Klan targeted not just African Americans, but Catholics, Jews, immigrants, and anyone who didn't fit their strict Christian code. The Klan's rise paralleled the growing power of anti immigration groups and was fueled by fear, racism, and a longing for an imagined pure American past. Nothing illustrated this better than the Sacco and Vanzetti case. Two Italian immigrant anarchists were convicted of murder in a highly controversial trial. Despite flimsy evidence, they were executed, cementing fears that justice was often warped by prejudice. The 1920s also saw a war between science and religion, most famously in the 1925 Scopes trial. When Tennessee outlawed the teaching of evolution, a biology teacher named John Scopes challenged the law. His trial pitted famed attorney Clarence Darrow against William Jennings Bryan, 3 time presidential candidate and staunch defender of biblical literalism. The Scopes monkey trial captured national attention and symbolized the decade's cultural clash: modernism versus traditionalism, faith versus science. Finally, no look at the 1920s would be complete without prohibition. The 18th Amendment, passed in 1919, banned the sale, production, and transportation of alcohol. What began as a moral crusade, often championed by women's reform groups, quickly turned into chaos. Prohibition bred resentment and lawlessness. Speakeasies multiplied. Bootlegging became a national pastime, and organized crime thrived. Gangsters like Al Capone ruled entire cities. violence, bribery, and black market booze earned the decade a new nickname, the gangster era. By 1933, Americans had had enough. The 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition, ending one of the boldest and most failed social experiments in U.S. history. The 1920s were a paradox, a decade of progress and prejudice, freedom and fear, cultural liberation and cultural backlash. Women pushed boundaries but remained trapped by inequality. Black Americans created a cultural renaissance while still fighting systemic racism. Immigrants faced harsh laws, and the country struggled to decide what kind of future it wanted: modern or traditional, open or closed, diverse or uniform. The echoes of the 1920s still resonate today. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.